Hello and welcome to another Wednesday Words of Wisdom from the church at Hiraeth. Today's verse comes from Proverbs chapter 3 and it's verse 5, which tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." The question is, who do we trust? 31 days ago, I read an article online in a newspaper written by a top political pundit in the USA that was telling us quite categorically that in 30 days from now, Donald Trump's government will cease to exist. He will not be the president, and that will be the end of Donald Trump. I think it was more, well, at the time when I read it, it was more wishful thinking on behalf of this top political pundit rather than based on any fact at all. And I took a screenshot because I thought that will make a great message all about trust and people's predictions that don't come true. Who do we trust in? Ever since I can remember, I'm going back now more than half a century, people have been telling us that the world is coming to an end via climate. It used to be an ice age was coming upon us. Now it seems to be the opposite end of the spectrum. But here we are all these years later, and dates that have actually been predicted. Greta Thunberg, for example, retweeted, well, it's called X now, of course, but we still use those terms, retweeted a post from a top scientist who said that by this date, the world will not exist, basically. And then she deleted it. Why? Because the date came and passed and the world is still here. We have these COP meetings, don't we? Whereby they talk about the impending doom that's coming upon the earth if we don't change our ways. There's one on the horizon in Brazil, and they have chopped down thousands of acres of rainforest to build roads to get the delegates who fly in by their thousands in private jets to the place where the conference is being held. People who travel by private jets, and obviously with the rainforest there, that's a big thing amongst folks who talk about the climate change in the world today, traveling there, who will be telling ordinary people that they can't have their holiday in Greece or Portugal or Spain this year because we need to save the climate, we need to save the world, and yet they'll be travelling in by private jet, never mind chopping down the rainforest. I started to doubt that government looked after my interests during the time of COVID. Up until then, I generally believed that I could trust the government. I could trust them to look after me and act on behalf of the citizens of the country. But it was during COVID that I began to question that. And there were a couple of instances that we would all be familiar with if we follow the news. One was a well-known modeler who right at the beginning was predicting doom and gloom, that there would be vast numbers of people dying if we didn't separate ourselves and put ourselves into a little bubble and have as little to do with others as possible. And then it came out that that man was actually having an adulterous affair. And then, of course, a government minister also doing the same as well. And when the WhatsApp messages were leaked, one of them was to fellow government ministers, "What can we do to scare the pants off people today?" So all the while, these people and many like them had access to the data, and they were telling us that we have to lock down. You can't see your grandmother, you can't see your parents, you can't see anyone at all. You have to lock down because this virus is so contagious that the events, if we do just mingle with people, will be catastrophic. And they had access to all the data. And while they were telling us that, they weren't doing it themselves. In other words, they weren't scared. They weren't frightened of what might happen. And it was that particular time that I began, as I've said, to think, government, does it always act in my interests? No, I don't think that it does. And we could go on, couldn't we? Looking at examples of where people have basically said, trust me, trust us. And yet, come time, we've seen that if we did put our trust in those people, it would have been totally misplaced. That verse in the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Who do we trust? Do we trust government? Do we trust politicians? Do we trust scientists? Do we trust people who say, follow the science? Do we trust people? Now, I'm not saying that we don't trust people to a certain extent and believe what's been told us. Of course, we take on board the information, but we now live in a day and age whereby we get to see the big picture rather than just that which folks want to tell us. And whether it's some of the examples I've mentioned, which are just generic ones, or perhaps others that we are aware of, where people have said, trust me, and actually our trust has been totally and 100% misplaced. There is one that we can trust. There is one that we can put our faith and our trust in, and he will never let us down, and he will be acting in our best interests. Of that, we have absolutely no doubt whatsoever.